Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out coconspirator.org. That's our website, coconspirator.org. We have so many free resources on there. The most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also, we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to do just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Chris Shorter. Chris is the City Administrator of the City of Baltimore. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Jonno, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here, very excited to be in conversation with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to catching up and hearing a bit of your story. First of all, Can you fill our listeners in on what you do as city administrator, and also for those outside Baltimore, outside the US, even? Tell us a little bit about the city of Baltimore as well.
Sure, absolutely. I am actually the first city administrator in the history of the city of Baltimore, especially for those who are not in the United States. Some of our cities, especially our older cities, function in a strong mayor system, and that is to say, there is no city manager. So in America, a lot of our big cities, especially on the West Coast, are managed by a professional city manager. That is someone who went to school and has been in the profession of city management throughout their career. They are usually appointed by a council. In the city of Baltimore, just like Washington, D.C., and New York, and other big cities on the East Coast, the cities are led by a strong mayor. And that is to say that the mayor is the chief executive of the city. And so here in Baltimore, our city is led by Mayor Brandon Scott, and I was appointed by him to manage the day to day operations of the city. It's a phenomenal role. It is a history making role because I am the first. And, and I will say a very complex role. I'm sure we'll get into that during this time together, Jonah. But that's a bit about the role.
Yeah, wonderful. And tell us about Baltimore.
Sure, yeah. But so, and I would encourage listeners to come visit the city. You really don't understand until you're here, and I'm speaking from experience, how beautiful the city is from an architectural perspective. It is one of the oldest cities in the country. And so you can imagine walking through some of the residential streets, especially in some of the commercial corridors, you see some amazing architecture. Um, the city today is made up of just over 580,000 residents, making it one of the largest cities in the country. And it is like I said, a strong mayor council form of government. Um, we have professional sports teams. We have a, a very healthy convention center circuit, and just an exciting city. We sit for those who are not in the United States, just about 50 miles from Washington D.C., the nation's capital. We are also very close to New York City and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So very close to some pretty major cities on the East Coast. It is a city of neighborhoods. That was one of the first things that I would say I understood in terms of the uniqueness of the city, that every neighborhood has its own very unique feel. And as I am getting to know Baltimore, it really does and has started with me getting to know individual communities.
Yeah, incredible. Thank you for sharing about that. I think it's always great to hear a little bit about when you're in such an important role in a city. It's great to hear a bit of an overview about the place. So thank you for that. Let's chat about your story, Chris. So to start with, take us back to growing up. To your childhood. What are some of the moments or even themes that shaped you into becoming the leader and the person you are today from that season of your life?
Really appreciate that question, Jonah. And I'll say I appreciate it because it was my childhood that led me into public service. Uh, as a 13, 14-year old growing up in Detroit, Michigan, uh, and I was an athletic kid and played sports, particularly football. And we used to, as a team, go from school to school. You can imagine, to play other teams. And it did not take long, I think, like I said, 13 or 14, before I started realizing and really coming into, sort of my own in terms of understanding the environment around me, realizing how different some neighborhoods were treated and how different some neighborhoods were invested in. And so I would go to these communities with tree-lined streets and beautiful big homes and schools with amazing facilities, and really reflect on sort of my neighborhood and where I grew up and how my facilities at the school that I attended looked and felt. And I realized again as a kid that I felt like the city should do better, and it should be doing better
Mm.
no matter where you lived. And so, as a 14-year-old, I knew I wanted to make cities better places to live and grow and learn and experience and work. So, and I've been blessed to stay on that path throughout my professional career.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing a little bit about that season. Uh, what was your first significant leadership opportunity? Obviously, there's those chances where we think um, I probably had the chance to do some leadership there, but the first time you really led a team, had people maybe you were working for you, or you were really in charge of a project.
Mm.
What comes to mind?
Yeah, I, I don't when you asked that question, as you were asking the question, I was thinking initially of titles. So when I held my first really executive title, um, but I think the deeper question is really when I was in a role where I felt responsible. And I would say before I was a chief operating officer or chief of staff or in an executive role, uh, I was an operations manager for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Washington, um, a nonprofit based in Washington D.C., but with um, sort of services in the region. And it was, I did not have a team. It was manager by title only, but I had a pretty significant sort of role in terms of influence in the region. And so I, as a young professional, really felt the responsibility, the weight of getting things done in a nonprofit that was really strained with resources. And I learned a lot in that role, a lot about young people, and certainly a lot about getting uh, inspiring others who don't formally report to you. And so it was a
Mm.
real leadership lesson, and I've had a lot of leadership lessons over the last few decades. But there, I would say, while I did not um, manage staff, I had a pretty significant sort of responsibility in terms of influencing staff to get things positive done. So that's the position I think I would say was the first in terms of leadership.
Yeah, so you had a sense of responsibility without the title of authority in terms of leading a group of people. Is that kind of right?
It is. It is.
I love that because I think there'd be a lot of leaders listening who might be frustrated because they find themselves in a role like that. How did you find leading in that sort of place without the title? Was there anything challenging about that? Was there anything you learned about how to do that from that role?
You know, one of the biggest lessons, I appreciate this question very much because even now, where I'm in an organization, our government is made up of about 14,000 employees. Um, the lessons that I learned really as a young professional who didn't necessarily have staff or people that reported to me, I am still using those lessons today. And so I think the biggest one is that, I had to listen more than I talked. And because when, some a group or team doesn't report to you, you really need to be able to make the case for why your ideas, why your service, why your program. will make things easier or better for them. And so you have to almost become a salesperson. Uh, to influence others. And I will say today, and even throughout my career, that skill, the skill of not necessarily um, leveraging or working from your title, but instead working as an equal, a co-conspirator, um, that it gets you much further with colleagues and with teams
Yeah.
than yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that approach, that collaborative, I like what you said, the co-conspirator approach is great. Um, and I think that's one of the challenges of leadership is to, leaders often talk about wanting their people to be more bought in. They want to see the fire in their eyes like that, like they have. And I think the sort of the other side of that coin is you have to be willing to really invite people into the processes, to really open up your hands and some of the things that you're set. You feel like they're immovable, but maybe just open your hands to actually let others contribute. And it's hard to do, but the win that you get is you really do get that buy-in from people and that collaboration.
Yeah. Yes, that's right, John. I completely agree, and I've experienced it directly. Yeah.
Mm. So as we fast forward from there, I'm interested in any aha moments so far in your career, Chris. Some of those moments that it's a turning point or a tipping point where you go, oh wow, oh my goodness, I saw a leader do that, or I was a leader and I dropped the ball here, or this went better than I could have hoped. Whoa, what's going on there? And they really burn into your memory, some of those moments. Does anything like that come to mind?
Yeah, I think about in terms of aha, one of the biggest and one of the first that come to mind as you were asking that question. My first uh, local government job in Washington D.C. was with the deepest end of our juvenile justice system. And I'll say that the deepest end of the juvenile justice system in Washington, D.C., at that time um, was filled with young people who were disconnected and failed by many of our public systems. They did not go to school. They, in some cases, were in foster care and was not successfully matriculating as young people through any system. And so really some just tragic stories and also some amazing stories of young people who prevailed. And I served in that system for about 4 years, 4.5 years, as first as a special assistant, but then as eventually as a chief of staff and chief operating officer. I really learned a lot of it again about how young people are treated, and how we as adults uh, need to work on behalf of and advocate for young people. Uh, I will tell you that after I left the deep end system, we refer to as the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services. I matriculated through the government in other leadership roles. I was the deputy director of our Office of Special Education. I was a chief operating officer for our health department. Um, and eventually, a new mayor was elected, who is actually still the mayor of Washington, D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser, and asked me to go temporarily lead our Department of Public Works. Up to that point in my career, I had primarily served in health or human services roles and was not an expert in public works at all. And so I was hesitant, but when a mayor uh, asks you to do something, you don't really say no. So I went to the department as the interim director. And what I realized after just a few weeks of being in the Department of Public Works was that many of the young people who I was advocating for, I would say 7, 8, 9 years before I made it to public works, were now working for me, or I should say with me, uh, in public works. It was an amazing aha moment, because what it sent, the message it sent to me as a leader, is that while we have significant work to do to keep our city beautiful and clean, and to pick up the trash, and to make sure that we are reducing the amount of waste being generated in the city, that as a leader, I also had a responsibility to the workforce. That these were men and women who needed their employer to see them as people, to see them as valuable. And because I had this sort of real connection, seeing, knowing many of them, as teenagers, um, that I felt responsible for making sure that we did as much as we could for them, to make sure that they had what they needed to do the best job for the city. So
Wow.
it really created a a lens, if you will, in me, where I really focused in on making sure that we did our, we were a good employer, and treated our workforce well.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. It's yeah, I'm interested to know. There's some great aha moments. Thank you for sharing those. When it comes to mentors or leaders who you have admired from afar or worked with and just really appreciated, who comes to mind? Anyone or a few people that you can think of?
Oh, that list is very long, Joan. I have been inspired by so many people, who have been mentors, or or administrators or leaders farther away. I would say, you know, first person that comes to mind is Dr. Frederick Humphreys. He was the president of my Florida A&M University, where I went to undergrad, and just a phenomenal leader. He was so personable, but also just a genius, I would say, in terms of the way he advocated for the university. He personally, uh, you don't hear about this from university presidents, from college presidents. He would personally come to the homes of national achievement scholars, students who were 11th, 12th grade, and recruit, like almost like a sports team, personally recruit them, talk to their parents, tell them why Florida A&M is the best university for them. And it really paid off. My freshman year at Florida A&M, we actually had more national achievement scholars than African American national achievement scholars than Harvard at the time in
Wow,
1996. So
that's
he really,
incredible.
yeah, it's absolutely stunning, and really a testament to Frederick Humphreys as a leader, and a champion and cheerleader for the university. So he is always someone who comes to mind when I think of leader, and champion.
Yeah, I love that story. Are there any other stories of how he led that come to mind with the way he handled different stakeholders, the way he led the student body, the way he invested in other leaders? Any other stories about him that you remember?
I do. So he at so at the time, Florida A&M is a historically black college, in Florida. Uh, you know, and this is often the case. What we refer to as HBCUs are oftentimes not resourced properly. They are not getting the funding from their states for those who are public institutions. And so we find ourselves as universities oftentimes sort of under resourced, and sometimes significantly under resourced. And so I saw a university president, I saw a Frederick Humphreys that was an amazing fundraiser. he really endorsed his leadership team. I can remember going to university conventions and seeing him promote the and by promote I mean really sing the praises of his executive leadership team. Um, Call out specific professors for doing amazing work or being, recognized by other institutions, and he did the same for students. So often, I mean, not often, but sometimes we see leaders who are really good at one aspect of leadership, but not as strong and good at other aspects of leadership. And what I will say is that for him, what I appreciated so much and why I remember his style and approach to leadership so much is because he really, um, you know, uh, I would say that he was good at all. I didn't, and then, yes, I was a student and young in my sort of lens on leadership, but he was able to touch um, the big crowds and also one on one. And he did it with university administrators and professors, with his board, with the state, and with students. So really, there were no limits. And he used to walk around campus and come and sit in the classrooms when he could. And so he was a well-rounded leader. And I think this is what we are called to do, especially in the public sector today. I wouldn't limit it to the public sector. I think in general, leaders are being called on to not be one dimensional, but to be able to really communicate to different crowds and at different levels of the organization. Um, and so he certainly displayed that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Wonderful, wonderful stories about his leadership. Well, I want to jump into Leadership Express, Chris, and just ask you a handful of questions. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, first question: what is a book that you've gifted to other people?
Hmm, it's a great question. Uh, the last book I gifted, it was a book called The Last Child in the Woods. And it really is a book about how much our relationship with nature and the sort of the natural world has shifted, especially for young people. We use tablets and electronics, and young people are not playing outdoors or in parks as much. And so it was a gift to the director of our Recreation and Parks Department in Austin, Texas, and so yeah, that's the first book that comes to mind. But I have a pretty long list of books that I've given away and received.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, next question: what is a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Mm. Um, Reminded of how important it is to listen more than you speak. And I say that to
Mm,
say I am in a new environment here in Baltimore City, and yes, I have had the privilege of serving in multiple cities in a very senior role. But I have not assumed that I'm an expert in Baltimore, and so it's been important for me to listen and make sure that I'm doing more of that than I am talking. And so it's a leadership lesson I learned early, and it certainly is very relevant today.
yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have any favorite questions that you ask in a one-on-one meeting with one of your people, in an interview with someone you're looking to hire, in a team? Are there any just favorite questions?
Hmm. Uh, I I almost always ask what brought them to public service. I think there's so many unique ways of coming into this work, especially local government and especially uh, cities in particular. And it's always a opportunity to find commonality Um, and so I'm often asking that question as a get to know you question in interviews.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Uh, what about a great piece of advice you've received? Could be about leadership, but also generally in life.
That that your journey is your own. I think it is helpful always to look at others, to learn lessons from watching, mentors and having um, leaders that you follow. But it is important to always recognize that your journey, the path that you are following, is your own path. And so um, it was great advice early on. It has led me to make some great decisions about when it was time to move on, or when it was, time when it was necessary to stay within an organization or within a city. So it was great advice, and I still use it.
Yeah, that is great advice. I love that. What about a movie or TV show that really impacted you? It could be something serious that was really profound, or something just switch off. That was just a lot of fun that you really appreciated.
Jonah, these are great questions. They're so diverse. We go from serious I would actually. There was a show called A Different World. It
Mm,
was like a spin-off of the Cosby Show, and it was about historically black. Historically, it was set in a historically black college, and
mm,
it opened my eyes to really to college and to college life. And so it was an amazing show, very funny and fun. And I'd also say there was an American show called The West Wing,
mm.
set in the White House, and really for those who had, um, a sort of a a warm heart for public service. I think that show just really it
Yeah.
yeah it set the stage, at least for me, to love the work that I do and to believe in in the role um, of leaders in the lives of everyday residents.
Yeah, that is such a good show. They're great recommendations. Thank you. Last question: if you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
Hmm. Well, I think I've said it, and I'll reiterate that
Mm,
that we, as young leaders, as more mature leaders, we should listen more than we're talking. Um, there's a time to be an executive and to make executive decisions, to lead your organizations, to push the envelope into new directions. But
mm,
I will also say there are times when you need to listen to, especially the employees who've been around for a little while, and who know the organization, know the customer base. In my case, know the residents that we serve.
mm,
It is very helpful throughout your career as a young professional, as a mid-career professional, and certainly as an executive, to always have the ability to walk in a room and
mm.
and take uh, and take what's there in terms of understanding. And so,
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Well, this has just been so much fun, Chris. I've loved hearing some of your story and chatting about just some great leadership principles. For those who've really enjoyed this and want to connect with you online, LinkedIn or Twitter, or find out more about the city of Baltimore, where can people find you online?
yeah, on LinkedIn, I am under Chris Shorter, and I am listed. It's a public profile as the administrator for the city of Baltimore. Please feel free to tag me or request my friendship.
Yeah.
You could also, find the great work that's being done by going to the BaltimoreCity.gov website. There's so much happening in the city. I will tell you, I feel like this is such a wonderful time to be in and around Baltimore City. So please
Mm.
do, um, stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's been great to find out a little bit about Baltimore too. Always good to, there might be someone who's listening and just tossing up where to travel to, and you may not have been on their radar, and it's great for them to consider Baltimore as a place to go and enjoy some of the things you have there. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in, and this has been a really fun episode and just great leadership advice and stories from Chris. Don't forget, listeners, we also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and Leadership Question of the Day podcast, two other places you can go to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Chris for being so generous with your time, for just sharing some wonderful stories from your past and just about some great leaders around you and great leadership principles. It's been a real joy. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, Jonah, thank you for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 questions on leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.